It is, of course, transfer day. This is the end of the transfer deadline. So all the big teams struggling and scrabbling to buy more players, you know, for £1 million pounds. You've never heard of them. But they're going to buy them just because they're going to buy them, you know. And the fans say, why haven't we bought more players? Well, we'll buy some more players then. Don't necessarily need them, but we're going to do it anyway. So, so far, last year, the entire deadline, the transfer window, British clubs spent £1.9 billion. I think they're already past the £2 billion mark this year. Massive deals like Jude Bellingham from Dortmund to Real Madrid, 88,000. Harry Kane, of course, from Spurs to Bayern Munich, 95,000. Caicedo, Brighton to Chelsea, 100 million. Declan Rice, 105 million, of course, from West Ham to Arsenal. Good player, but he ain't worth 105 million. That's ridiculous. It's just they're so overpriced, all these people. I say it's a kind of a madness, and I don't know, I don't like rules and regulations, but maybe something should be done. Let's talk to TalkSPORT's chief football correspondent, Alex Crook. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning.
This is a bit out of control, isn't it? You know, all this huge amount of money. Was it Klopp said a few months ago, the day I spend £100 million on a player is the day I quit football. 2 months later, there he is bidding 115 million for Caicedo, you know, and so on and so forth. There's a kind of insanity about this, isn't there?
Well, there is, particularly if you look at the market, and it's basically Premier League clubs and clubs right at the top of the Premier League food chain who are funding the market, because a lot of the European leagues now, you're not seeing this kind of grotesque, to use your word, spending. So I wonder how much longer it will last until Premier League clubs rise up to the fact, actually, we're just bidding against ourselves, guys. Let's bring these transfer fees down and we can actually save ourselves a few quid. But you're right, that was quite ironic from Jurgen Klopp. They made that £111 million bid for Moises Caicedo after he threatened to quit if he did get past the £100 million mark.
Of course, he ended up going to Chelsea. And the other element of this, you know, I'm a Fulham fan, and it's just so depressing, you know, that you know, you create a team, you got, you know, a couple of outstanding players emerge from the mix like Panino and Mitrovic, and with a sort of grim inevitability, in come the big club every year. Oh, we'll give you 80 million, you know. So all the smaller clubs just get their best players systematically plucked away by the big clubs with the Arab and the Russian and the American money. It's kind of depressing, isn't it?
Yeah, I can understand that. Obviously, Mitrovic off to Saudi Arabia. Even Marco Silva, I think the manager of Fulham, was quite depressed about that. And here we are on deadline day. One of the big stories, I think, will be João Paulinho inevitably joining Bayern Munich. I was told yesterday Fulham wanted £80 million for him. Looks like 60 million will be enough. So it didn't take them too much bargaining to buckle. But there are examples of clubs who can sell their best players and prosper. You mentioned Moises Caicedo there. Brighton have also lost Alexis McAllister. They sold Marc Cucurella a year ago and still managed to finish in the European position, sixth in the Premier League, their highest ever finish. So I think if you're properly run, I think if you're a smaller club in the Premier League, you have to plan for this, because you know that players are just passing through. And I guess you always need to have the next one coming off the conveyor belt, as Brighton have done so well. I do fear for Fulham this season, sorry to say.
Yeah, tell me about it. Thanks very much for that. But yeah, I know. What, I mean, is there a case for, I don't know, limiting the amount of players that clubs can buy? I mean, I recognise football is business, but there's no doubt now that this transfer window and the transfer deadline day has boiled down to, among some of the clubs, just buying players for the sake of it because the other clubs are doing it. Is there a case for perhaps limiting the amount of players they can buy, or maybe limiting the amount of money they're allowed to spend?
Well, there has been talk in the recent past about a spend cap. I think it'd be difficult now to implement that. I think that horse has probably bolted. We do have financial fair play, which some people will scoff at and say, well, it's not worth the paper it's written on. But if you look at what Chelsea have done this summer, for example, they spent £400 million. They've also sold quite a lot of their homegrown talent, which, again, I guess is a negative of this transfer window, because fans like to see players like Mason Mount come through the academy and then see out their career at Stamford Bridge. They had to sell him to Manchester United, A, because he wasn't agreeing a new contract, but B, because the money they got, £65 million, goes down as 100% profit on the balance sheet. We've just seen Manchester City sell Cole Palmer to Chelsea for £45 million. He's an academy graduate. So again, from a Manchester City perspective, that's £45 million of pure profit. So I think what we're going to see now, and this is not necessarily good for the game, is the bigger clubs cashing in on their academies, and therefore it makes it even more difficult for players to progress from an academy into the first team.
Absolutely. Chelsea, they say under Abramovich, spent too much, always buying players. Since Abramovich left, they've spent £1 billion. Chelsea are actually the only club in the world where the number of players they have is more than the number of fans that turn up to the average game. They've got about 100,000 players now, so they should have a good season. Alex, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. Alex Crook there, TalkSport Chief Football Correspondent. Benedict Spence has been with me since 6:30 this morning. He's about to wend his way. Thank you so much, Benedict. Your thoughts on the transfer window? You're a big Liverpool fan.
I actually think this is going to sound a bit pessimistic. I think this is the beginning of the end of English football being the top dog, and it's been caused.
Do you think the Saudi Arabian League might begin?
That's what this isn't like.
Because of course,
this isn't like America.
Goes on for another month.
This isn't like America or China, where they take players to be a retirement league and pay them big money to be 35-year-old entertainers. The transfer that sort of stuck out in my mind this year, probably one that most English fans won't have heard of, is a boy called Gabriel Veiga from Celta Vigo. He's 21. Linked with Real Madrid, Liverpool, all the big sides. He's gone to Saudi Arabia. This is the key thing. The Saudis can do this now. They don't have to go to the big European leagues and take the ready-made stars. They can go to Latin America, they can go to Africa especially, and they can sign the young kids who are going to be the next stars, because they can offer them 3, 4, 5 times what they'll get. That is how the shift will happen, ultimately. And you need to look at clubs like City, like Newcastle. They've looked at this, and they've used it as a model, and now they're just transplanting it.
Thank you very much to Benedict Spence.